Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LIHEAP Technical Assistance webinar on the LIHEAP Outreach, Getting the Most Bang for the Buck. This is our first TA webinar for 2019, and we're so excited that you could all join us today. My name is Benita Sinaraja, and I will be your moderator from the contracted LIHEAP Technical Assistance team at Brilliant. As a reminder, we are recording today's webinar, and it will be available on the LIHEAP OCS website at a later date. You are currently all in listen-only mode. After dialing into the webinar, you should have entered in your access code and audio PIN, which are located on your control panel. And it's important that you enter in that audio PIN, as that enables me as your moderator to unmute your line so that you're able to speak on the call. And when it's time for the question and answer section, you can enter in your questions in the question box in your control panel, or you can click on the raised hand icon. And please note, we are going to be holding questions until the end of the presentation. As usual, we have a few great speakers today for you on this topic. Tom Reel, who you know very well, is our technical lead for our Brilliant team and has spent most of his career with the state of Indiana in the administration of community services programs, which includes LIHEAP. We'll also hear from Akam Rahman, who serves as the Program Operations Branch Chief within the Division of Energy Assistance, Office of Community Services at the Administration for Children and Families. He manages the operations team that conducts LIHEAP grantee monitoring, plan reviews, and provides training and technical assistance to over 200 grantees located within the 10 ACF regions. And last but never least is Kate Thomas, who is our Energy Assistance Program Specialist and Regional Liaison for LIHEAP in the Office of Community Services. And she's been in the operations branch of the DEA since May 2015, and many of you know her because she's the main point of contact for state and tribal LIHEAP grantees in Regions 3 and 6. So as I mentioned, we're going to hold questions until the end, but if you think of something, feel free to write it into the question box as we go through the session in the control panel, and then when we get to the Q&A at the end, I will definitely go through the queue and call on you. So we're glad that you can all join us today, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Akam.
Thank you, Benita. Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everyone. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Division of Energy Assistance to today's webinar on outreach. Let me thank you all and our presenters for taking the time during this busy season to participate in this discussion. I also would like to acknowledge hundreds of LIHEAP grantees and sub-grantees for conducting outreach at the local level so that households can become aware of this very important assistance program and how to apply for assistance they need. Our effort today is to complement those ongoing outreach efforts. Today, a few of us will try to take a deep dive into this topic and offer you with some insight about how LIHEAP grantees are taking various initiatives and what we believe can be done with the broad flexibilities available under the LIHEAP block grant rules. We're going to look at how outreach can be used as a tool for ensuring eligible households are aware of LIHEAP and can gain access to the important benefits that the program affords them. We'll also discuss how outreach efforts are designed, planned for, and implemented by grantees, highlighting some specific initiatives that are contained in their model plan outreach section. Outreach, of course, is included in the that one specific section, but as you all know, it spans to many other sections of the model plan. For example, crisis assistance, weatherization assistance, outreach, and referral. These are two key part of LIHEAP, among other things. We will examine a sample outreach calendar and list some resources that will find valuable in reviewing your outreach efforts. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's look at what the law tells us about outreach. As you can see on the screen, I'm not going to read it. We're going to leave it here for a minute, for a few seconds. Assurance 3, as you know, that LIHEAP grantees, as a condition of funding each year, they assure our office that they will conduct outreach, among other things. So outreach is listed under Assurance 3. Under Assurance 3, the grantee certifies in their LIHEAP plan that it will conduct outreach activities designed to assure that eligible households are made aware of the availability of LIHEAP assistance, similar assistance through the Community Services Block Grant, also known as CSBG, and any other assistance program. Since LIHEAP is a block grant, once again, grantees are encouraged to develop their own outreach methods and strategies based on local needs, which often can go beyond what is required under this assurance. In other words, the law is very broad, and because LIHEAP is a block grant, we always encourage and we always rely on our grantees to develop their own outreach methods. During this webinar, you will hear about those strategies, like working with many other parties, such as utility companies, foundations, low-income housing offices or low-income housing projects, for example, tribal programs, and medical communities. I'm just listing here a few, but outreach, as you know from working with LIHEAP, that there are many other places where a LIHEAP grantee can reach out to facilitate outreach for their customers. Okay, in general, we're going to talk a little bit about numbers. As you know, this outreach webinar is not so much about statistics, but about strategies, but we're going to show a few statistics just to illustrate some points here. So in general, the trends have been mixed. There are states where the data shows increases in the number of households served, and there are also states where we are seeing decreases in the same population. Our grantees will tell you that providing a meaningful LIHEAP benefit amount and serving additional households is not a trade-off. With efficient planning, both can be accomplished. For example, a grantee can serve a significant number of LIHEAP customers with a benefit amount that is meaningful based on their local needs. It doesn't have to be a trade-off. Using several years of household reports, let's look at some numbers in terms of heating assistance. There you go. However, we do not know yet why certain grantees are serving fewer heating assistance households. These numbers do not represent the overall program operations. We know that LIHEAP funds are also used for cooling, crisis assistance, and home weatherization programs. We're not showing those statistics here, but overall, as you can see, the statistics are available from 2011 through 2016. So we're seeing a downward trend in terms of number of households assisted with heating assistance. Next slide, please. Okay, funding. Funding is also a big part of LIHEAP assistance, as you know. We know that the number of household assistants in the heating program declined from 2011 to 2016, as you just saw in the previous slide. In 2011, the program served nearly 6.9 million households with heating assistance. By 2016, the number had fallen to 5.2 million households. If you would like to know more about these things, I think there are many ways to analyze LIHEAP data. One such source is the LIHEAP performance measure data, which can talk about some other aspects of LIHEAP. Going back to funding, during the same time frame, that is fiscal year 2011 through 2016, LIHEAP funding also experienced changes. The biggest change, as you can see on this slide, we saw it in recent years, about 6 years ago. The total amount of funding available for LIHEAP decreased from $4.96 billion in 2011 to over $3 billion in 2012. However, during the last couple of fiscal years, in fiscal year 2018 and 2019, LIHEAP funding slightly increased to approximately $3.6 billion. Okay, some additional trends. So this slide shows the funding and also decline in LIHEAP population. So here are some of the national trends comparing funding levels to households served over the period. While there was a significant decrease in funding starting with 2012, funding continued to decrease, but at a much slower pace, as you can see on this slide. We're not looking at many possible causes for this decline in this webinar. Instead, we are looking at the effect that a renewed outreach effort may have in turning these numbers around. We'll begin by looking at one state grantee's example. Now I'm going to hand over the presentation to Kate Thomas of Division of Energy Assistance. She and others have spent an enormous amount of time working on this topic, and I congratulate the team for putting together such an interesting webinar today. Kate?
Thank you, Akam, and good afternoon, everyone. So here's one of the many grantee examples we can look at to show where a renewed outreach effort can reverse a trend of a declining number of households applying for and receiving assistance. This grantee, which is North Dakota, noted that in fiscal year 2016, the number of households served with heating assistance had been declining for several years. So take a look at the generally declining numbers from 2013 through 2016 in column 3 of the chart. Reviewing their household reports showed that the overall number of households applying for heating assistance was also declining. If you take a look at column 2, that's indicated there, the number of heating applicants from 2013 to 2016. Furthermore, the number of households served among targeted vulnerable populations was declining over the years as well. And that's indicated in columns 4 and 5 of the chart, the numbers of elderly assisted and the numbers of disabled assisted. So, in fiscal year 2016, North Dakota decided to implement a new outreach strategy, which in this case included an effort in their expansive rural areas to increase access to applications. The emphasis of the outreach effort was in helping households where the age or the disability of the applicant were, which were in North Dakota's target population, might create barriers to completing and submitting applications. North Dakota continued to track the data provided by its contractor, and as can be seen in this chart, the trend was significantly turned around. It was turned around in all of the subcategories shown: the number of applicants, the overall number of assisted households, and the number of assisted targeted households. So note that this same process could also be used to establish trends for each of the grantees, sub-grantees, or other local offices based on their individual local household reports. And this is feasible if you have your local offices or satellite offices do many household reports that you combine into one overall household report. The same process could also be used to locate service areas where household counts are declining and populations are underserved. The same process could be used to evaluate sub-grantees' performance over time, using it for risk assessment purposes, for instance. It could be used to identify trends by various program components, specifically looking at numbers for cooling versus heating or crisis, for example. And the same process could also be used to identify trends at various poverty levels. So there's many ways to use the data that you can get just from studying your annual household report numbers when comparing them from year to year. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tom Reel to talk a bit more about targeting for outreach.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, that's a very interesting example of how the state did use it to integrate outreach into their overall planning process, and I think turn the numbers around based on that. So let's look at some ways we might duplicate that and look at some examples as we go along here. First of all, I think we could examine a few of the fundamentals of outreach, targeting and tailoring target populations, and coordination. Starting with targeting priority households here. When we're trying to decide what households to target with our outreach efforts, we have two pretty good sources for determining that from the statute. One is Assurance 3, which we've already looked at, and of course Assurance 3 requires outreach to all households who might be eligible, but specifies elderly individuals in a household, disabled individuals in a household, and households with high home energy burdens. Now remember that home energy burden has a very specific definition, and that is energy cost divided by household income to get a percentage of the household income spent on energy. So those things can be incorporated or should be incorporated according to Assurance 3. There's another area in the statute in the energy need definition of in section 2603 that also calls attention to elderly and disabled households, but then adds also households with young children as a possible target for your outreach and your other program efforts. And young children as you define it, but generally it's usually defined as children under 6. Then there's nothing in the statute that precludes you from choosing other target priority households. So, for example, Iowa in their plan talks about households with limited income. Colorado in their plan talks about households that have working poor. And New Mexico, as we see here in their plan, talks about targeting households with non-English or limited English speakers in the household. The Colorado outreach study that was done
Tom, are you still there? Hi, Tom, are you still there? Caden, Acom, can you still hear Tom? I'm sorry, everyone. I think we're having some technical
No, we
difficulties.
can't get, I can't hear him.
Okay.
His audio is dropped.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone.
That's okay. Do you want me to take over, Benita, for the rest of this until he gets back on?
Yeah, I think that would be great, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I think Tom was talking when he kind of lost audio there about the study in Colorado. He was highlighting Colorado, and they did an outreach study, and the research group conducted interviews with seniors, disabled individuals, low income, and the study found that each of the 3 target populations was best reached in different ways and is motivated to action by different messages. In Iowa, the grantee not only chose targets, but made sure that the outreach was tailored to the target audiences. In this case, by where materials were placed. So based on the households identified in the statute, the Iowa grantee determined its high priority households would be the lowest income households with young children age 6 or younger, households with elderly members age 60 or older, and households with disabled members. And then the grantee worked to tailor outreach efforts to each of the target groups by focusing outreach at these places. The working poor, they did some outreach at the SNAP office. For young children, they worked with the schools to do outreach in the school lunches and with the child care. For the elderly, they focused some of their efforts on the agencies on aging. And then for the disabled, they worked to focus some of their outreach at the developmental disability agency. In Maryland, the program director said that each local administering agency must develop an outreach plan on an annual basis that reflects the unique character and conditions of the jurisdiction. The local outreach plan shall include the list of all activities planned by each local jurisdiction for the purpose of meeting outreach goals. So that's another approach.
Thanks, Kate. Tom, are you back on?
I am back on. Sorry about that. I had an interruption there. Thanks, Kate.
No problem.
Then finally, in this part, we wanted to mention Assurance 4, which is an assurance that's quite often coordinated with outreach efforts. And as we mentioned, I think Aiken mentioned a while ago, Assurance 4 points out several areas where you are assuring that you will coordinate with other programs and other services available. Obviously, with the CSBG program, there's a lot of coordination locally because frequently CAP agencies are the ones that conduct both services under Community Services Block Grant and LIHEAP. It also requires SSI coordination with SSBG, and as we know, we coordinate a lot with services under the Weatherization Assistance Program, and pretty much says that any other energy-related program should be coordinated in terms of your outreach and your other services under the program. I know in Indiana we had township trustees, which were local township trustees who provided poor relief in that area. And so we quite frequently on the local level would coordinate benefits with that agency and with the LIHEAP agency, usually again through the local community action network. So with that, let me turn it back over to Kate, and thanks again, Kate, for all your, or I guess we'll turn it over to Benita here, and she's going to talk a little about a few poll questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So we just wanted to get some feedback from everyone on the webinar today, and we have some real basic questions that we just want to quickly run through with all of you. So let me ask our first poll question. And hopefully you guys can all see it. The question is, are your outreach plans actually reviewed and updated annually? You can just hit yes or no. And no wrong answer. We can't see who's saying what. It's just to know yes or no. Let us know. We've got about half the group has voted. Leave it open for just a second. Okay, so looks like about 80% definitely are making sure that they are reviewed and updated annually. Okay, and moving on, let's go to our next question. Okay, so our next question is, do you make outreach an integral part of your annual planning process? Again, this is just helping us gather feedback from different grantees on how you approach your outreach plan. No right or wrong, just please be honest. Okay, we've got half the group has voted. Okay. So as you can see, a vast majority of the group definitely does make outreach an integral part of your annual process. Okay, we've got a couple more questions. Okay, so our next one is, are outreach program requirements communicated and implemented throughout your service area? Give everybody a little bit of time to answer that. Okay, it looks like we've got a majority who have voted. As you can see, pretty high number, about 90% of you are saying that those requirements are communicated and implemented throughout your area. And one last question before we move on. Are there approaches to outreach that you use to specifically target groups that have your priority for benefits? And this is a yes or no. If you feel like you would like to share what some of those approaches are, feel free to type them into your control panel, and we'll just keep a log of that. And we'll leave voting open for a few more seconds. If you'd like to just write in kind of what your approach is to specifically target a group, definitely write that into the control panel. We'd love to see your ideas. Okay, I'll close that and share. And again, still a good majority, almost 3/4 of you have some approaches to outreach that you use to specifically target groups. Okay. Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for participating. That's really helpful. All right, I'll turn it back over to Kate.
Thank you, Benita, and great poll questions. It looked like everyone, for the majority, was scoring in the 80s and 90s on their self-reporting there for outreach. So that's great that everybody's doing a good job. I think the lowest score was maybe in the 70s, and that was on the targeting. And so that's good that we're having the webinar to discuss this targeting a little bit more. We're going to look at several approaches now to conducting outreach and targeting and the various aspects you could consider for your program if you need to make any changes or revise or revamp your approach for conducting outreach. So who conducts outreach for your program? And how is it done? Outreach can be done in many ways. It can be done at the grantee level, so by the state or the tribe or the territory itself. It can be done at the local level. It can be performed by an independent entity, such as a community action association or other partner. It can be done through an agreement or contract, or it can be done by some combination of these approaches. In taking a look at the submitted annual model plans, we found that most grantees implement outreach at both the grantee and the sub-grantee level if they have sub-grantees. We found that some states like Massachusetts have outreach requirements in their vendor agreements. We found that Maryland has an approach where they allocate a portion of their outreach funds on a formula basis to its sub-grantees. The formula is a combination of county offices and community action agencies. But then they have a separate portion of outreach funds that are made available to fund annual competitive local proposals to meet the state's specific outreach goal of reducing the number of denials based on incomplete applications. Very cool. North Dakota, we talked about them a little bit. In addition to using its local offices for outreach, it contracts with a separate statewide organization to conduct certain outreach activities that are specifically designed to increase access to their program. And in Puerto Rico, they have 96 satellite offices throughout the island that have been delegated to conduct local outreach. So those are a few ways. Now we ask the question, how do you pay for outreach? So the statute says that outreach is an allowable use of LIHEAP funds, but neither the LIHEAP statute or the regulations define administrative cost. So we rely on grantees to define administrative or program cost categories. Therefore, when setting your policies and preparing your budget, you can decide whether outreach activities are part of administrative cost or other program cost. Some agencies budget outreach as an administrative cost and some as a program support cost, according to your own definitions and consistent with with social service program definitions that are adopted in the LIHEAP program. If a grantee decides that outreach costs are part of program costs, then these services should be factored into one of the program components in the model plan budget, or they may be spread across program components in the model plan budget. For more information about budgeting for outreach, you could also look at our website in the information memorandum that we issued in December of 2000. So here are some typical outreach costs: materials and supplies, media costs, outreach site, online or internet marketing, outreach travel, outreach staff time, etc. But your cost may vary according to your agency's definitions and fiscal controls. Note that any cost attributed to outreach should be clearly defined, budgeted, paid for properly, and tracked accurately. To be properly charged, outreach should be differentiated in definition from other staff activities, tracked through employee records like timesheets, and allocated according to a valid methodology. How are outreach dollars allocated to subgrantees, if you have subgrantees? Well, subgrantees usually receive an allocation for outreach as a part of their local budgets and agreements. Subgrantee allocation is usually based on a formula that considers things like the number of households served in a particular area. Some agencies make a portion of the funding available on a competitive proposal basis, like we talked about in Maryland. Colorado also has a competitive proposal process. Most LIHEAP funds are allocated for county outreach according to prior year caseloads. Counties with the highest caseloads receiving the highest allocation. Then local agencies can compete for a share of $100,000 in annual outreach incentive funds. Those funds are awarded competitively based on the local agency's innovative approaches to outreach. So how do you know if your outreach efforts are working? Well, check the numbers. Compare trends over the years, especially after a concerted outreach effort, like we showed in our previous North Dakota example. Also, using Maryland as an example again, in addition to more traditional outreach goals, Maryland has a set goal for its competitive funding to reduce the number of denials caused by incomplete applications. In other words, funds are competitively available for local outreach proposals that set up links between a proposed outreach activity and assisting applicants through to the completion of the entire application process. Follow-up is being made to determine the number of these completed cases pre- and post-award of outreach funds to evaluate the effectiveness of the activity. Note that these trends are to be examined for each local agency as well as for the state overall. You can also consider using website and social media analytics to measure the reach of your outreach. You could also consider using an application question to track outreach. For instance, you can ask on your application, how did you hear about LIHEAP? Now we're going to look at using what's available in the area of outreach resources. You can see here the number of state grantees reporting each type of outreach activity in their model plan. Let's look at some types of outreach conducted by states, territories, and tribes based on these and other reports in the areas of placement and coordination, increasing program awareness, and improving program access. Here is a list of some specific coordinating agencies cited in the LIHEAP model plans. The Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands reports an outreach coalition of various programs, all of whom coordinate their outreach activities. They specifically involve the Nutritional Assistance Program, Child Care Development Fund, Family Youth Enhancement Program, Community Action Agencies, and the Women's Association. Minnesota coordinates outreach with a number of agencies as well. You might want to take a look at these partners and developing your own list of partner agencies. California is one of many states that coordinates their outreach with utility companies. They noted that Pacific Gas and Electric Company conducts outreach through local organizations to coordinate their rate reduction benefits with LIHEAP and other groups. Outreach includes multilingual posters, brochures, bill inserts, and targeted community events there in California. That's great. Note that 31 grantees actually execute interagency agreements with other low-income program offices to perform outreach to target groups. And that looks many different ways. I'd like to pause to ask if anyone has an interagency agreement they would like to share with the network. If you do, please email that to me, because I think it would be useful for grantees to have lots of examples of agreements to look at if they're interested in using that approach but don't have an agreement in place yet. Now, as we saw on a previous slide, 31 grantees indicate that they publish articles and conduct mass mailings in their outreach. 51 grantees report that they inform low-income households whenever they are in contact with them for any low-income program. Here are some agencies which specify in their model plan how they increase program awareness through outreach. The Canarsie Indian Tribe in Alaska maintains a Facebook page on which they publicize the availability of outreach funds. And Maryland is one of the many states that have outreach videos for use on their website. Sunita, could you click to start the video?
Yes, I sure can. I'm just going to get our audio set up real quick.
This is a great example of a LIHEAP outreach video.
Here in Maryland, we believe in helping our friends and neighbors, which is why when weather turns cold, the Maryland Office of Home Energy Programs is here to help you stay warm. If you are having a little trouble keeping up with high energy costs, and these days a lot of us are, we offer helpful grants to keep the heat going. Every year, over 100,000 households benefit from our programs. People just like you who feel squeezed by high energy costs.
I'm a senior on a fixed income. Thanks to the Office of Home Energy Program, I can stay warm this winter.
If you think you might qualify for energy assistance, there are a few easy ways to apply. Go online to dhr.maryland.gov/benefits. Mail in your forms or apply in person. Call 1-800-332-6347 to find the mailing address or location of your local county office. This winter, don't let high energy costs leave you out in the cold.
And big thanks to Marilyn for letting us show that example.
Here.
Great. So now an important aspect of outreach that has developed over the years is to provide services which will increase access to program benefits. And this chart shows many specific ways, some which are required, for improving program access. And one example on this page that I'd like to point out is Wisconsin. They've identified several personal barriers to applying and provided better access by setting up ways to provide interpretation services for deaf applicants, provide reading services for blind applicants, and assist with access for applicants with limited English proficiency. Another approach I'd like to highlight here is Minnesota's software program that they use to map LIHEAP program services by zip code. The number of households served is compared to the number of eligible households in each area. And then the state provides the information to the local service agency around the, in the various parts of the states with the recommendation that additional outreach be considered for the low service area. The state feels that the additional outreach done increases access and program participation in the underserved areas. So that's another great tool to use. And let's look at the steps that you can take to examine your own outreach efforts each year in order to ensure you're reaching the groups that you need to reach. We'll use this monthly planning guide that might assist you in creating your own outreach calendar. So here are some things you can consider doing. Perhaps in the month of May, you might write and share a success story about an applicant's receipt of LIHEAP the previous season. Just make sure you get the LIHEAP recipient's written permission. In June, or whenever it's appropriate, consider inviting your partners, local administering agencies if applicable, advocacy organizations, colleagues, the public, energy vendors, any stakeholders to participate in the development of your LIHEAP plan. Because the plan includes the section on how LIHEAP outreach will be done. And it's also a good way to get people engaged from the beginning stages of the program. So if you hold your hearing or your public participation in June, this is a good time to do that. Also, June might be a good time to have program offices perform outreach to target groups, especially for summer cooling programs. And lastly, from June to September, grantees can reach out to the previous year's applicants through mailers or other forms of outreach and begin startup activities. July is a good time to execute interagency agreements with partners to engage others in helping to conduct outreach to target groups. In August, you may want to consider preparing a newsletter article about LIHEAP or submitting a newspaper op-ed. September is a great time to spread the word about the upcoming program dates and require documentation on your website or social media accounts, such as Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And consider using hashtags to increase the reach of your post. Examples of hashtags are the little number or pound sign. So your post could hashtag LIHEAP or hashtag LIHEAP saves lives. And there's some other examples included here too. October might be a good time, if you haven't done it already, to send LIHEAP pre-registration flyers for elderly, disabled, and children under 6. You could work with Head Start or senior centers, health departments, things of that nature. October is also usually when the National Weatherization Day occurs, so you might want to consider hosting an outreach event to showcase your LIHEAP weatherization activities and services. Another way to reach people about general LIHEAP services and heating assistance, weatherization, all the above. November, again, if you haven't done it already in the year, it's a good time to do a mass mailing to prior year LIHEAP recipients. Sometimes these are recertification letters. And there are also several other examples of things you can do in November on your screen. PSAs, etc. And December includes a few new opportunities, such as participating in health fair events, school events, holiday events. Partner with schools to include LIHEAP flyers with items in the school backpack programs. Lots of ways to get others involved and get the word out about outreach here. And lastly, don't forget to make announcements on your website and social media to reach the general public and people who may not already know about the program. So this doesn't necessarily need to be done in January. It can be done when it makes the most sense for your program. But it's important to try to utilize the technology that you have available because a lot of people are looking for information online and need up-to-date information about how they can receive assistance, especially for the people that aren't normally applying. So the main thing is that all LIHEAP grantees should examine the service trends in their own programs. If needed, you may find the need to reemphasize or revamp outreach activities as a way of improving services by reaching out to certain groups who may not have the knowledge about LIHEAP availability or may lack access to the program because of certain barriers and household vulnerabilities. This webinar reviews the many ways that grantees have to reach out to targeted groups. Consider various ways to budget for outreach. Outreach, when made an important part of an ongoing calendar of planning, will improve program performance and provide much-needed benefits to low-income households. And don't forget to establish your own outreach calendar to ensure outreach is a key part of your planning process, and make it a part of your policy manual so it's embedded for your program year after year. And Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kate. Very interesting. I love that calendar. I think that'd be very useful in the planning process. Let's look at a few resources we're going to leave you with here. First, there's a lot of resources for training, as you know, on the OCS site, showing some webinars. There was a great webinar that I found. It was done several years ago, but on the use of social media, and it was still a very useful webinar, I think Brilliant did. You might look at that and take advantage of some of those techniques in terms of outreach through Facebook or other social media platforms. We did a brief webinar in the late summer targeted towards territories, but it was on outreach and target populations. You might look at that too. Then, of course, the regulatory resources we've talked about. Assurance 3 and 4 are good ones to review. There is, again, the authority to use LIHEAP funds for outreach is specific in the statute. And then the IM that Kate referred to that talks a little more about the use of outreach either as administration or program support funds. You can look at that in that IM. The LIHEAP Clearinghouse, always a great source for articles on any LIHEAP topic, has quite a few articles and some information on outreach, including tribal outreach, engaging hard-to-reach clients, and several other really good articles that will help you. And there's also some selected outreach plans on the website. NCAT also has a toll on the next slide. NCAT has a toll-free number that people can call to find out where to apply for energy assistance. And then there's also some notes that NCAT took after they had a focus group last March on outreach strategies and innovations, and I think that's available on LIHEAP Clearinghouse website, and that's an interesting one to look at. And then finally, there are a number of state grantee resources, and if you Google LIHEAP outreach, you're going to find lots of them. The Colorado outreach study is very interesting, although done some years ago. We talked about the use of incentive funds for a certain portion of the outreach locally. Colorado, there's an application that Colorado has that's on the web, and that'll give you a lot of information about how that's set up. And then Iowa did a good outreach study some years ago too. And throughout this presentation, you've seen that we've relied on information from North Dakota and Maryland, Indiana, Canadian Tribe, Puerto Rico, Massachusetts. There are a number of states, and as I say, Googling outreach, LIHEAP outreach will bring up quite a bit of information. With that, I'll turn it back to Benita for a Q&A session.
All right, thank you, Tom, and to Kate and Akam for this valuable information. I do have a couple more questions that I'd love to ask. So if we can all engage in one more poll question, I'll launch that. And so we want to ask, do you feel that you're doing anything unique that others may not be doing in the realm of outreach? Yes or no? And if your answer is yes, I would strongly encourage you to please type in what are some of the things that you're doing in the control panel so that we can share them with the group. We don't need to call out names if you don't want us to, but it would be certainly very, very helpful if you can respond to that. If you feel like you're doing anything unique. And if you're not, that's okay too. Definitely, we want this webinar to be useful and as something that can give you some ideas to approach in this next LIHEAP year. So if you are doing anything unique, feel free to write it in the control panel. Looks like almost half the group has voted. Okay. Okay. So about 3/4 of the group said that they didn't feel like they are doing anything unique, which is totally fine. You have to do what works for your program and the resources available to you. And we really do hope that some of the ideas and strategies from today's webinar can help you feel a little bit more empowered to take a second look at your outreach activities and plans in the coming year. I just have a couple more questions that we'd love to kind of get your feedback on. And the first is to find out, who is currently using an interagency agreement to help with, contacting your partners to conduct outreach. See if you can let us know if you are doing it or not yet, but you want to be in the future, or, if you don't need it, that's okay too. But this just kind of helps us to know where everybody is, and it's good to know if you are interested in this in the future, and maybe that can help with some future technical assistance as well. I promise this is my second to last poll question for everybody. It looks like we almost have about half the group has voted, so please just select an answer. This is really valuable information for us to kind of, for our next steps and helping with the outreach. While people are trying to answer that question, I will share that one of our grantees shared that one of their community action agencies has a community awareness day in the month of August. So that's a great way to talk to your community and do some outreach there. That's an awesome idea. Okay, so let's close this poll and I'll show these results. So it looks like we're about evenly split between using an interagency agreement or not yet, but want to be in the future, and then about a third of the group certainly may not need an interagency agreement. So it's really helpful to know. Last question, and this is an easy one, I promise, is who's using social media to conduct outreach? And again, are you doing this already? Not yet, but you want to, or no, and you don't really have plans to right now. It doesn't work for your program or whatnot. So please be honest and vote, because again, this also helps us with future training opportunities and just to know kind of how you're getting out into your community. We have about half the group who has voted. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, I will close that and share. So about half of you, a little over half, are already using social media to conduct outreach, which is great. Hopefully you're using one of the or multiple platforms to get out there. And we've got, and over a third of the group are definitely hoping to. So that's very, very helpful to know. That's great. Thanks so much for everyone for participating in these polls. We definitely appreciate it, and that feedback is great. So I encourage you, if you have any questions for our presenters, go ahead and you can either type them in the control panel and I'll unmute your line, or you can click the raised hand icon and I will certainly call on you that way. So feel free to, we've got a lot of time for questions. Okay, it looks like our first one comes from Tanya Peter. Tanya, your line is unmuted if you'd like to ask your question.
I hit that button on accident.
Oh, okay. No worries. That happens a lot. Okay. So some of the other grantees are just kind of sharing some of their ideas of how they do outreach as well. And some use Facebook and Twitter, definitely as their social media platforms. Some are also saying they have YouTube on their website. That helps a lot too. And I'm going to, hopefully they don't mind, Leslie, I'm going to read what you wrote. This is a great idea. Credit for this outreach initiative goes to Illinois' largest sub-grantee, which is 49% of the state's applications, so it's quite a bit. They're using an Excel add-on called PowerMap to analyze zip codes and target service based on census income data and past application trends per zip code. That's really cool. So if anybody's really interested in finding out a little bit more about what's going on with Illinois sub-grantee, let me know and we'll connect you to them. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Do we have any questions from the group? I do want to apologize again for some of our technical difficulties earlier, and also we had to change the date of this webinar. It was originally for the 10th and it was moved today, so this is a single webinar. It's just for today, and we'll record it and post it on the website as I mentioned earlier. So sorry for any confusion. We do not have a webinar, second one on the 10th. Okay, Akram, Kate, and Tom, it looks like we don't have any questions. You guys must have been extra thorough today.
I just wanted to thank everyone, Benita, and also, you know, if anyone needs any assistance with designing outreach or anything about sharing noteworthy practices, and if you need any help from our office, please feel free to let us know. And also, if you have any questions about usability of LIHEAP funds for outreach purposes or anything else, just feel free to let us know. We're here for that.
And one question we actually did get from one of our grantees today is, does anybody have a template to market LIHEAP in Head Start schools? So if any of the grantees on the line do have something that you use to market LIHEAP with Head Start, please email it to us and we'll definitely share it with the person who was asking. It's a great question. You guys are definitely your best resource to each other for sure. Okay. Well, we so appreciate you joining today's webinar, and we're glad we can give you a little bit more of your time back in your day. So have a great day, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year.
Thank you.